All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg on Thursday. So glad to have this opportunity to chat with you, and I am acknowledging for those who are watching live, we're getting a little bit of a late start. For that, I apologize. I had a lot of stories I was kind of juggling, and it took me a little longer than usual to get going this morning, so that's why I'm getting underway a little afternoon East Coast time rather than my normal preferred target start time most days of high noon. Well, it's not always high noon. It's not. I guess now we're in standard time, so it would be high noon when the sun is at the highest, the apogee. But noon, whether it's standard time and high noon, or if it's daylight savings time, and I guess then it would be before the actual high noon, right? Because you spring forward, so that would mean it would really be 11 a.m. when it's noon in the summer, 11 a.m. standard time. And of course, it also depends where you are in the time zone. But basically, try to start at noon, regardless of whether it's standard or daylight savings time. And I don't always get there. We start with kind of what I think is a stupid question, isn't it? I mean, what's the appeal? You see these two beautiful people, these very high status individuals, with very nice symmetrical faces. And I'm asking, what's the appeal? Because there was an article, I mean, we're all interested, right? I mean, I shouldn't say we all are, but my son has a friend who is now going to watch Kansas City Chiefs football games with him because Taylor Swift is shown a few times, not even that often, maybe a minute or maybe not even a minute of full screen time. But when the Kansas City Chiefs score a touchdown, especially when Travis Kelce, her boyfriend, you can see, I'm going to say fiance. I don't know if that's official, but it would seem kind of likely. They're together so much and they go on vacations together and she goes to all his games and he's gone to her concerts. So let's assume maybe he's her friend. They're both in their 30s now. It would seem to be about the age that they would likely be getting engaged. His older brother is married with at least one child, maybe more. So it all seems to suggest that they're planning to make it permanent. And as I mentioned, Taylor Swift, probably the most popular entertainer in the world now, a billionaire, and her appeal is such that young women, I believe, mostly are now actually watching football games where they previously were not interested because they might get to see her celebrating with Kelce's family, with Patrick Mahomes' wife, and others who are part of the Kansas City Chiefs family, if I can use that term, and I guess she's now part of that. But I ask, what's the appeal? Because we are interested. It's not just they're interested in each other. We are interested in them. And there are specific reasons that I want to delve into why, especially Taylor Swift would be interested in Travis Kelce, because there's an article in the Baltimore Sun that caught my attention. I actually shared this article on Facebook and it got many more likes and also dislikes. I mean, people took on what I had to say and certainly what the writer had to say of this piece that was in the Sun. So I thought it was worth addressing. And, also why I believe that the actual appeal that each of these two people has for each other, each have for each other, strongly supports my political views that I consistently promote on this live stream and that I've been doing for many, many years, which is that as a society, we need our government to guarantee that everyone has enough and nobody has too much. I think that is a key aspect of a civilized society, of a decent society, a society where everyone can thrive, or most of us can thrive, where there is, fair play. I think it's really, really important that we don't let some people, for whatever reason, whether it's choosing the right parents or because they're particularly smart or they have a nice singing voice or they're strong and fast, and can catch a football. That's all well and good, and we all admire. I mean, that's in the human nature to admire physically dominant men, beautiful women, talented people, regardless of sex or gender. We respond to them. And if they live a little better than the rest of us, so be it. I mean, whatever. That's just the way it's going to be. You can go back to ancient Greece, storytellers, warriors, Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world. They get all sorts of dispensations that the rest of us don't get. And I'm not going to say we can, even if we tried, we could change that. What we can do, though, is make sure that those of us who aren't as fortunate, who didn't win the genetic lottery in some fashion, get enough, have enough, live a decent life, and also have access to romantic partners, are able to find someone that will love us and that we can love. Because that essential aspect of humanity is threatened very seriously when you have massive wealth and income inequality. Only certain people are going to be able to find a lover, a spouse, a mate. The numbers that are available, that are desirable in a society where a few have everything and everyone else has almost nothing, is greatly reduced. Your opportunities for a fulfilling romantic life, if you're not beautiful, if you're not athletic, if you're not intelligent, if you're not born to the manor, are greatly reduced in a society where there's tremendous skewing, where the Gini coefficient, if I can use that term, is very, very high. Gini coefficient measures wealth and income inequality. So for this reason, along with so many others, it's imperative. It's a moral obligation in a decent society. A decent society makes sure everyone has enough and no one has too much. And that's not the society we live in. So let me get in, though. So this article, and by the way, I want to say that, and I'll talk about this tomorrow too on the free-for-all. And call me, 240-242-5646. I'm going to try to remember the number because I get confused and I say the wrong numbers, and I do apologize. I think one reason, and I've really looked into this. I mean, by the way, I did invite the author of this article, Emily Fleming. I invited her to join me today, and I was very gratified. First of all, she responded. This was in the Baltimore Sun, so I subscribed to the Sun. And I'm not sure whether someone else brought this to my attention. I think I saw it, and then I brought it to some other people's attention. But the author, Emily Fleming, I invited her to join me because I knew I was going to talk about this, and I want to platform, highlight, center writers, not just talk about what they write, but actually speak to them directly. So I did reach out to Ms. Fleming yesterday, and she, to my delight, did respond and said she was interested. She couldn't make it at noon today. She would hopefully get back to me. And she also said she had watched one of my live streams as a result. And she said 20 minutes, so she didn't watch the whole thing. This was from, I think, yesterday's. But she really enjoyed it. She said that she liked my measured tone. I guess that I'm trying to see both sides of issues. So thank you, Ms. Fleming. I appreciate that. And I told her, I gave her a synopsis of what I planned to say in hopes that she would want to come and respond to it if she doesn't watch the live stream. So Emily Fleming, I believe she's a therapist of some sort. I should have taken there was a note in the paper about it and I didn't write it down, but she indicated that as a millennial. So I think if you're a millennial, what does that mean? You're like in your 30s, same as Taylor Swift. If you're in that age group, and as I mentioned, she's very, very popular, Taylor Swift. And not just among millennials, I guess Gen Z, is that younger? I don't really get all this. I don't know if my kids, are they Gen Z? I think so. They're in their 20s. She's incredibly popular. And of course, one of her fans, Emily Fleming, was excited that she found love, as she puts it, with Travis Kelce. But what disappointed Emily Fleming is that she observed behaviors by Travis Kelce that she felt were bully. Well, she uses the term bully. He acted like a bully. And she doesn't understand. She, describes that he threw his helmet and warm-up equipment, or threw the helmet and warm-up equipment of the Ravens kicker Justin Tucker as he was warming up. I didn't see that. I didn't watch that pregame footage. And I'm guessing that it may have been, I don't know, maybe for the cameras. I mean, they're all these guys play for the cameras. You see they're doing their little dances in the end zone and blowing kisses to their moms and all that. A lot of it is clearly contrived. It's planned in advance. It's far from spontaneous. For all we know, and I wouldn't, I'm going to suspect he's not, why are you going to go over to the other guy's side and start throwing their stuff? I mean, it is so juvenile, right? I'm not putting it past. I mean, athletes are very juvenile. I remember talking to a friend of, not only a friend, but, a close personal friend, a friend of my KRXA, talking about their experiences with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So it's baseball, not football, but just that they're just so immature. And a lot of those guys, they were in their early 20s even, so a little younger than Kelce. But, it's kind of like Arrested Development. You don't have to be mature if you're a professional athlete. You just don't. And you're handed so much on a silver platter in so many ways. And to the extent that obviously these people work hard and they're talented. I'm not denying any of that. But things are taken care of for them so that they can focus on one thing. And that's hitting a baseball, throwing a football, blocking somebody else, tackling, hurting somebody. So they don't have to develop other life skills. I'm not saying a lot of them don't, but it's kind of de rigueur, right? Like when I was 28, when I started working as a lawyer, I mean, I had to, I'm still immature, but you have to kind of be responsible and on time, and people aren't calling you saying you had to be at court at a certain time and this and that. These athletes don't really have some of those issues. So they get to stay a little immature. Now, I don't know, was Kelce throwing the helmet because he really thought that was like appropriate, or did he do it because ESPN said, hey, why don't you go over there and throw Tucker's helmet around and we'll all get a good chuckle, maybe. But let's assume he was being a bully as, deliberately. That was just his idea. As Fleming says, is that like a reason, for us to criticize Taylor Swift for being in love with him, for finding him incredibly attractive? I mean, I think people do need to be responsible for their romantic choices. But let's be honest. It is kind of chemistry, right? In The Godfather, when Michael is exiled to Sicily and he sees Apollonia, they say he was struck by the thunderbolt, right? That's how it's described. That's like a Sicilian saying. He was struck by the thunderbolt. So it's recognized. It's not like conscious, rational. I mean, we all make rational decisions. Oh, are they, somebody that I want to spend my life with? And you examine that. But the initial attraction isn't based on a sober weighing of a person's qualities. Well, they're this is good, this isn't, I like this, I don't. I mean, it's you just find them really attractive. And why would Taylor Swift find Travis Kelce attractive? I mean, I'm not going to spend nearly as much time on the Kelce appeal, why Kelce finds Taylor Swift attractive, because to me that seems, maybe because I'm a guy, but I don't think anyone really questions it. We're all like, well, of course. Who wouldn't find Taylor Swift attractive? She's beautiful. She's talented. She's very wealthy. I mean, it seems like you would, but you could say all those same things about Kelsey, right? I mean, he's an extremely handsome man, very symmetrical face, very wealthy, and very successful at what he does. Very famous, world champion. I mean, so, but what this, and that should be enough. But what this writer, Emily Fleming, points out is that, at least from what she's observed and as she describes it, he's not a nice guy. He's not kindly. Now, is Taylor Swift? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, from what I understand, she is. All of her fans say she's great. But I'm sure all of Kelsey's fans say he is too. But this, again, is the focus is on Kelsey because the article was about Kelsey. And I also think we learned something about why, again, by examining the appeal that a truly dominant alpha male has to a woman who could pretty much have her pick, right? I mean, I think most men would really be very, very happy to have a relationship with Taylor Swift. And she, in fact, has had many relationships. So clearly she does have a lot of appeal. I mean, based on her song, she's always writing about new boyfriends and, gosh, I don't know, dozens, I'm going to guess, at a minimum. But so what Fleming says, though, is based on bad behavior that she observed. He's a bad boy. By choosing Kelsey, is Taylor Swift saying she's not evolved or healed? I mean, I'm trying to understand what that means. Healed, I guess she had bad relationships. Some other guys didn't treat her well. Maybe they cheated on her. I don't know. Maybe she cheated on them. I mean, people do this to each other. But maybe she didn't kind of look into herself and what really she wants. Well, I mean, that's not what people do. Like I just said, you meet somebody, you see them, they are handsome, they are beautiful, they are smart, they may say something witty, and that's kind of it. You fall in love with them. And then over time, maybe you fall out of love, maybe you don't. But I think it's unfair, really, to judge her. Look, I don't judge, honestly, Donald Trump's wives for marrying him. I don't. I judge them based on their behaviors. And from what I've observed, they're not that impressive. I mean, but that's based on their behaviors. You can marry a jerk and be a wonderful person. I think we know other, relationships like that go both ways. Sometimes you're like, what is that he doing with her? He's so nice. She's not. I mean, we see it both ways. I don't judge you because you make a bad choice, maybe. I might feel bad for you. I might sympathize with you, but I'm not going to criticize Taylor Swift. And I'm not even convinced she made a bad choice. And I don't know. Is she the loser? I doubt. I mean, look, there's problem with some of these athletes. Yes, from what I understand, they've done studies. They're not more prone to relationship violence than other people. But if you make your living getting hit, getting knocked around, and hitting other people, I think that does something to your brain. I'm not saying that because you play football, that means you yourself are more violent. But I do think, from how pervasive, is it called CTE? Did I get that right? Is among football players, you are taking that risk, because a pretty significant one if you date a football player. But there's a lot of benefits, right? There's a lot of benefits, and we see, and I think this is why I was going to say I sometimes may struggle to find a larger audience. I think a large reason is just, I'm not that well known. But I think another reason is that my views are kind of bizarre in a lot of ways. Like, I'm not a fan of, I'm very progressive. My solutions, which I just said, the fact of some people in our society having extraordinary appeal to others as a romantic partner, while others have little appeal based on wealth and other considerations, dominance, as if you're a male, to me is very strong evidence that we should redistribute wealth so that we all have our chances to find love, which is a critical part of being a happy human being, a fulfilled human being. But others would take issue with the framing to begin with, and they would say, well, the reason that's not even true. It's not even true that women prefer dominant men. It's only because they have fewer opportunities. So if you give women just as many opportunities to become CEOs and what have you, then they're not going to go for dominant men any more than men are going to go for dominant women. Well, I reject that. I think that's hardwired. We're talking about millions of years of evolution. We're talking about observations that have been seen across space and time. And also, it is true that in a society with massive wealth and inequality, wealthy, powerful women are more appealing. They do find more mates. And you know what? That's great for them, but it isn't great for poor, struggling, and working class women who aren't able to find mates, who are further behind when it comes to finding mates because they don't have those advantages. So even if it is true that a significant part of the differences we see in behaviors between men and women when it comes to who they choose for a romantic partnership, even if we argue, even if you said, well, look, yes, we do see that men choose younger, more beautiful women, however you objectively define beauty, more feminine-looking women tend to be more attractive, deemed to be more attractive by men. Even if a large part of that is cultural, even if a large part of that is due to considerations that aren't evolutionarily hardwired into us, I say, so what? It's the way it is. So we still have to make society fairer so that everyone gets their chance at the brass ring. So I posted this, and this is why I say I have a lot of trouble maybe reaching some people, because I think when people watch videos or they watch YouTube or they watch the news or they read the newspaper, they want their beliefs validated. They want their views corroborated. They want to hear the same opinions that they have spouted by somebody else. And not only that, I think we all have very sensitive antennae for views that don't comport with our own worldview. So I may talk all day long about how we need higher taxes and how we need to make sure that everyone has enough and we need to address the climate catastrophe. And a lot of you may agree with that. But when I start saying, and yeah, there are innate biological differences, there are evolutionary there are differences that evolved over time in men and women, some of you are like, no, that's wrong, Hal, you're wrong. It's all cultural. It's all a function of our patriarchal society. And you turn off. You don't want to hear the rest of what I have to say. Then there are those who say, oh yeah, right on, Hal. Yeah, of course men and women are different. What are you talking about taking my money from me? What are you talking about raising taxes? What are you talking about, this climate catastrophe? What the hell are you even talking about? I like it when it's a little warmer. So if you don't hew to a consistent line as people see it, a consistent political line, you're going to offend everybody. And I mean, so be it. All I can do is tell you what I believe and try to be as persuasive as I can be. But if you disagree, please let me know. 240-242-5646. Would love to speak to you. So I posted this article on Facebook by Fleming. And I commented, millions of years of natural selection and evolution have instilled in women a powerful innate preference for alpha males. Now, was that trolling? Maybe a little bit. I knew some people wouldn't like to read that, although I believe it. It would strongly counter evolutionary pressures if a beautiful, talented, rich woman like Taylor Swift, who has her choice of mates to a much greater degree, selected a peaceful, kindly male. Well, I stand by that. And then I got this response from a person who has sometimes not liked what I posted on their page, so I'm not surprised that they were critical of what I had to say. But look at it. That person got a lot of likes. People don't, on my Facebook page, who are by and large progressives, people who found me through the old KRXA 540 or through my organizing days or through maybe halginsberg.com, whatever, agree with some, said, oh, I agree with him on this and he's right on that. But basically, by and large, standard issue, left liberal Democrats to relatively progressive. And there is a received wisdom. There's a certain standard views that you're supposed to have if you're in that group. And one of those is that observed differences between men and women are cultural in nature, not biological. Kind of the extreme view that comports with that, the extremist view that comports with that would be Amanda Marcotte at Salon, who I think is a very dangerous ignoramus. But I think she writes for a lot of people on the left, or at least who perceive themselves in some ways on the left. So the response that got a lot of love, who's to say Kelsey's not peaceful and kindly? And what makes those attributes an exclusion to a so-called alpha male, which is basically a first draft, well, alpha, right? So ha ha ha. Stupidity reigns in that statement. So, I mean, obviously there's no interest in having a dialogue or discussion when you write that. Who's to say he's not peaceful and kindly? Well, that's what the article says. I mean, I didn't say that. That's what the writer, Emily Fleming, said based on her observations. And what makes those attributes an exclusion to a so-called alpha male? And look, a lot of love for that statement. 4 thumbs up and then 1 hug. Care. No, I mean, I'm like, well, that's not what an alpha male is. It's a dominant. It means you're dominant. It means you have influence, power over others, right? The alpha male in the pack, the alpha wolf, is dominant. They may rule in part by kindliness, but behind it is fear, is instilling fear in others. So it seems so clear, so obvious. And if you don't want to believe what I have to say, I went and did some more research. Now, I want to be honest, of course. I went back and looked through a lot of articles and stuff, and this is kind of cherry picking. I found articles that support my view. You can find others that don't. I think my view is better represented. I think it's clear from our personal observations. These don't strike me, the views I'm expressing here, as particularly strange or counter to basic daily observations. Think about high school. Were guys who were, kind of wallflowers, shy? Did they find girls chasing after them, or was it, the quarterback of the football team? I mean, is it really even a challenge to confirm these? Do you really need some pointy-headed, egghead expert to tell you? It seems so clear. And I don't, just because something seems clear doesn't mean it's always true. But then if the evidence supports it, the scientific evidence, the data support, where do you go? It's like people say, well, I don't believe those crazy climatologists who are telling me it's getting hotter. Okay, well then look at the glaciers that aren't there anymore. Look at an ice-free Arctic. You don't need a goofball, 4 eyes to tell you from, Stanford, Cal, Harvard to tell you. It's right in front of your face. This is why, yes, we should believe, we should trust the science to a degree, but does the science comport with our everyday observations? And I think most of the time it does. It's like Galileo was talking about gravity and how every object exerts an equal force on every two objects each exert the same force on each other. And the way Galileo proved that is he went to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I don't know if this really happens, we say, and he dropped a heavy cannonball and a light cannonball, and they both hit the ground at the same time. And this isn't what was predicted. The prediction was, well, heavier objects fall faster. Galileo said, no, because the light one doesn't, has less, I don't even understand. I frankly don't. I'm going to try to explain it. I can't explain it. Because if you drop a piece of paper, you drop a wadded up piece of paper, and it falls pretty much at the same pace as velocity as something else. But if you don't wad up the piece of paper and you just drop it, it floats very slowly because it has to do with the amount of resistance to the air and all that. I don't really understand all that stuff, to be frank. But Galileo's scientific conclusion was ultimately supported by an observation that everybody could make. So we all see this. We see this in high school. We see it in our presidents. We see it in CEOs and wealthy people, wealthy men. Yes, they attract women, period. That's the end of story. So the question was, well, what does it even mean about being alpha male? Why can't you be evolved? Well, here's from evolutionary psychology. There are two aspects to what would be considered an alpha or high status male. One is interpersonal dominance, one's ability to prevail over another in competitive encounters. And that's exactly what you see in Travis Kelce, right? I mean, he wins football games. He beats the defender. He catches balls that other players couldn't catch. He wins games with Patrick Mahomes. The two of them together are able to dominate other opponents. And that's not being nice. They do it with strength and speed and muscle. And they beat people up in doing it. That's not being kindly. And the second is the capacity to acquire resources, right? So you have money. And obviously, he does. I mean, so those are what, in the end, and I'm not saying this is what Taylor Swift says consciously, but who's to doubt that those are massive attraction that he has for her? And fine, she should date who she wants. She finds him attractive because he's good looking and strong and rich and a winner. Fine, good for her. She's very, very lucky. She gets to date whom she wants. She gets to perhaps, I said, maybe marry. That's great for her. And people should be with whom they want to be with, who wants to be with them. And obviously he wants to be with her just as much as she wants to be with him. So that's great. But people who aren't as beautiful as Taylor Swift, who aren't as athletic and dominant as Travis Kelce, should also have opportunities to find love. And if you live in a society where all the resources are concentrated among a few people, everyone else really gets short shrift. So yes, we do need to make sure. And by the way, if we redistributed resources so that everyone had enough and no one has too much, sure. A Travis Kelce, which should still be very, very appealing. But guys who are teachers, social workers, women who aren't beautiful pop stars, would also have real appeal. To the extent that male, the attractiveness that men have for beautiful young partners, that is certainly innate, but it's not exclusive. Men also find women who are talented, women who are financially secure attractive. So if you're not somebody who can attract a Taylor Swift, but there's other women out there who are also fine, good, they're doing well, there are lots of them, then you'll find somebody. But if the way society is set up, there's a few beautiful people and talented people and rich people at the top and smart people, and everyone else is kind of scrambling and working, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, then they're not going to find each other attractive. And it's just, that's human nature. So we can't let the market make decisions ultimately about how wealth is distributed, because it does a poor job. It does a good job of allocating resources to a degree, but does a very poor job of ensuring that all have enough and none have too much. So I just wanted to just a little bit more, because I thought this was somewhat interesting. Let me see if this. Okay, so again, what do women want? And then we'll move on, because I probably worry this topic to death. 240-242-5646. I want to get to Israel and Palestine, because just a couple of stories I just read in the New York Times, I think lend a lot of support for my position, which is, and I've been making it, Israel is the very, very bad actor. If they're not committing genocide, they're committing genocidal acts. And our support, our full-throated support for Israel is so bad, so wrong-headed, that you can't support. I think that we cannot, in good faith, support Joe Biden for re-election. But let me just make one more point on this issue. Excuse me. So I thought this was interesting. Reproductive strategies and relationship preferences. So this is from DOI. I don't know what that exactly is, but some journal. And this goes back to 2010. And the argument in it, or the conclusion, the abstract, is what women prefer. And it's certainly not anything that should come as a shock. I mean, it's basically what I've been talking about the whole time. But there are two types of men that women seem to prefer in relationships. This is innately. This is not a criticism. This is it's not a bug. This is a feature of the human condition. So let me see if I can maybe I'm going to do it this way, because I'm having to show you the whole thing. Yeah. Get rid of that thing there. Excuse me. So here we go. So women prefer two kinds of men. Dominant men like the Travis Kelce type, and prestigious men, and Travis Kelce is also prestigious, as long-term mates. Those are the traits, right? It's not about being kindly. It's not about being a good tipper. It's if you're dominant, in other words, you win over other men, you beat them. Or you're prestigious, you have money, you're socially, you have a lot of wealth, you've accumulated resources. So again, this is who we are. And if you want things so I just wanted to get a different study, and I guess that was the only reason. So I'm kind of being repetitive there, and I apologize to that. But the final point, this is really the slide I should have shown, is it's not just women, or it's not just people. And obviously, you get into, gays and lesbians. And so it's not just but But I think what we've tended to find is that gay men look for the same traits in other men that they're seeking as romantic partners as straight men seek in romantic partners. And lesbians seek in their romantic partners the same traits that women tend to seek, although perhaps to a lesser degree. But it's not just when you're looking for a romantic partner. They actually did a study where they found that men are more interested in looking at high status men. So people attend preferentially to high status men. And when you see like a picture of a Barack Obama, obviously a high status man, or to not use Travis Kelce as an example, or Patrick Mahomes and mention, you see a picture of a Tom Brady, someone who's a high status male, a Denzel Washington. You notice them, you see them, you think they're there more often than they even are, and our attention is fixated on them. So, people who meet that criteria, or according to the study, women who are very attractive, because apparently high status women don't garner that same kind of interest from other men or women. But because we as humans find high status men and beautiful women particularly appealing, they're going to get breaks. They're going to get advantages. And I don't think we can say that they deserve them, that they're somehow better people. A lot of times they're a lot worse people. They got where they are because they're especially aggressive, or they're especially willing to cut corners and take advantage of others. Those aren't traits that we want to. They cheat, right? Like Lance Armstrong won all those Tours de France because he cheated. You get great rewards sometimes if you cheat. And I don't think we want to incentivize any more than we already have those kinds of bad behaviors that hurt others. So how do we address that? Well, we make sure that everyone has enough and no one has too much. You don't get too much. You don't get too much for cheating. Maybe you get a little bit, but you don't get to live that much better than everyone else. Seems pretty obvious. And of course, that way too, people who want and need, as we all do, romance, love, will have a much greater opportunity to find those. And again, this, just to say again, I think this is for some folks counterintuitive, because you're like, well, how you're talking about these traits as though they're innate. And they're not. They're not. It's all cultural. It's all just we're the way we are because society is bad. Well, okay, but we're also the way we are because this is how we've evolved over millions of years. And regardless of whether it's nature, nurture, or both, we have to address the negative implications that flow, the negative the negative results that flow from this kind of human preference, this kind of human desire. All right, so I want to move on because I was talking about Israel as well, and I've spent a lot of time on it. And, this is another example. Israel is a dominant state. Israel is a powerful country, and it uses that power to bully those within its orbit, especially those who aren't Jewish. But it's just a bully, period. And one of the areas where I've been focusing lately is not just their abuse and mistreatment of Palestinian individuals, but also what we call domicide, where you destroy their homes. And the New York Times today, to its credit, came out with a story about Israelis' domicide. I actually think I said today. It's Dateline today. But I think maybe I didn't see this yesterday. Maybe I first saw it today. I'm not sure. But wherever I saw it, it certainly caught my eye. So let me just play. It's actually a little video. I hope you can read that. Israel's controlled demolitions are razing neighborhoods in Gaza. You can see that February 1. And then residential buildings. We already know that they've been destroying hospitals and other institutional buildings. Here's a residential neighborhood demolished. And you can see the explosion. It's just extraordinary. The amount of damage is just mind-blowing, mind-boggling. They just plant these friggin' landmines or whatever they are, bombs, I don't know what they are, explosives, high-intensity devices, and they just blow buildings up. And what's the military? They say, Israel says, well, this is where Hamas is hiding out. Really? There's tunnels under all those buildings. They're just turning that, they're sowing those those fields with salt. I was struck by this quote, and I'll explain why in a moment, but I thought this was very, very interesting. Where the New York Times, and I give the Times credit, because I'm critical of it. I'm critical of corporate media, and to a degree, it's not quite corporate because they have some kind of weird ownership management where they have these Oak Sulzbergers who are kind of run the business, even though you can also buy shares of it. It's kind of a weird hybrid setup. They've demonstrated pretty much a certain fealty to Israel. But here in the article, they describe what's been destroyed. And I was struck by that. A resort hotel overlooking the Mediterranean. And entire sections of residential neighborhoods. At least 33 controlled demolitions destroyed hundreds of buildings. And they acknowledge it could be, they say at least, it could be more. It could be more. So, why did this? Well, I had been involved in surprise, a online argument, a social media argument with I hope he's still a good friend. I want to believe that we're still close. I don't know if we are. And I gave the gender away, so I won't say they. He was very upset with my criticism of Israel. And specifically when I called Israel I called Gaza a concentration camp that Israel is maintaining between the desert and the sea. And this comment did not sit well with my friend. And his response, I just want to show you. Here it is. I just Googled 5-star hotel in Gaza. They don't have concentration camps, don't have 5-star hotels. Well, I thought this was an absurd argument on its face, because just because there's a nice place, a nice resort on the Mediterranean in Gaza doesn't mean that the regular everyday Gazans aren't subject to terrible oppression every day of their lives. It just means that few rich people can go there. Maybe they take a cruise. For all I know, they take a cruise ship and it's all walled off. Like you can go to the Dominican Republic or Haiti, I even think, and find some pretty nice places to stay. But that doesn't mean that the people who live in those countries or around those resorts aren't living hand-to-mouth, very challenging existences. And I'm not calling them, or Haiti especially, which is, I guess, the poorest country in the world, or has been until recently, one of the poorest in the world. I'm not saying that's a concentration camp. It's not the same. But Gaza movement is incredibly restricted. The opportunities to survive are limited, and now they're even more limited, and people are being bombed out of their homes, caught domicide, and worse. But even when it comes to this particular argument, even if you accept, and as I understand it, even in concentration camps, there were some residences that were pretty nice, not for the inmates, but for the head of the camp, for the commandant, for honored guests. I saw this in a movie. I saw that in a movie with the Wizard of Oz, Frank Morgan, I believe. He was imprisoned, a Jewish professor. He was imprisoned in a concentration camp, and at one point, somebody goes to visit him, and there's I guess a relatively nice quarters for that person. So it's not true that there weren't at least somewhat pleasant quarters for some people in some concentration camps. But that doesn't mean they're not concentration camps. It's what the conditions are like for the inmates, and they're just absolutely devastating. But even there, even if you somehow bought that argument, that resort ain't there anymore, it was blown up. It's gone. So there isn't a 5-star hotel in Gaza. So I would hope my friend is reconsidering his view. I mean, saw that. Maybe he's like, yeah, maybe Hal had a point. Oh, I always love it when people say that to me. Yeah, maybe I was wrong about that. It's always somewhat gratifying to read that. Domicide. So this is from Just Security, and what they tell us is that indeed, and remember, Israel is before the World Court on a charge of genocide by South Africa. And the World Court hasn't made a decision, but they said that there's certainly aspects of the way Israel is acting that concern them, and they ordered Israel to stop, discontinue, or prevent any genocidal acts. I don't know if they ever said, well, they are committing genocide or genocidal acts, but they said you have to prevent them, which to my way of thinking implies that they're committing them. The act of domicide, destroying homes, we just saw them blown up, may be considered, they say punished, may be considered a part of genocide if it's taken with an intent to destroy a group. Well, I don't know how you'd take it in any other way. I mean, isn't it clearly designed to just clear these people out? To clear the residents out? I don't know how else you could look at it. It seems awfully clear to me. That's what Israel is doing. That is what our taxpayer money is funding. We're paying for that. We're complicit in that. You cannot. I don't believe you can. And I've heard John argue the contrary. Well, how you're just talking about foreign policy. It's not just foreign policy. And Jill Stein said, we are Gaza. Look, of course, we're not really Gaza. I mean, those people are different. They're solitary organisms. They're separate organisms. But in the end, yes, when we treat people really badly, that hurts. When our government that we support harms others or supports crimes against humanity, it absolutely does say something about us. It absolutely does reflect a soullessness on our part if we're not willing to say, no, this has to end. This has to stop. And I want to just comment one other. I don't have it here, but in response to my criticism of the squad, one of my commenters on YouTube said, well, they're the ones who are speaking. How come you're so critical of the squad? They're the ones who are speaking out against Israel and for Palestine. I don't know how much clearer I can be. I've said it so many times. They voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the House Speaker and to be House Minority Leader. They voted for somebody who is an AIPAC stooge. And the most important vote that AOC, Pramila Jayapal, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, the most important vote. Presley, you like Jamie Raskin, they all voted for Jeffries. So everything else is just window dressing. That's what matters. And it was a terrible, terrible thing for them to do. Domicide is awful. Torture, probably worse, right? I mean, I would say it is. I mean, if you destroy 1,000 homes and you render 3, 4, 5,000 people houseless, homeless, can we say that's as bad as torturing one person? I don't know. It's kind of torture when you put someone on the street. Torture is really, really, really awful. This is from, and I want to give the New York Times credit. Again, props. January 23rd. Stripped, beaten, or vanished. Israel's treatment of Gaza detainees raises alarm. We're supporting that. Joe Biden, Genocide Joe, is supporting that. You vote for Joe Biden, you own that. You don't have to vote for Joe Biden. You vote for Joe Biden, I think you own that. Now, this story has photos accompanying it, showing you some of what Israel's doing to these detainees, who are not necessarily part of Hamas. Here they are in a truck, all hunched over. Some of their eyes are covered because they've been injured, being transported who knows where. So we have pictures. This is documented. And then there's description. There's very, very brutal, painful description of what Israel's doing. And, cold, naked, almost naked, surrounded by Israeli soldiers. And this Ayman Lubad, who's Israeli, the soldiers have guns, assault weapons, is yelling. I guess Lubad is actually, no, he's a Palestinian. The photos and videos show him and other detainees wearing only underwear in rows, being yelled at. We're occupying all of Gaza. You're Hamas, right? You want Hamas. They don't even say there's something. You want Hamas. So it's collective guilt. They're all guilty. That is not in any way allowed. That is not in any way acceptable. That is not in any way not a crime against nature, a crime against humanity. And there are some pictures that they describe here. So photographs taken by Gaza journalists show detainees treated in hospital, skin worn down. And the UN, so I wanted you to see that. The UN says this could be torture. So I would say yes. I would say that's torture. It's painful just to look at. That was after weeks. And there's plenty of other photos. I'm not going to show you. There's plenty of other photos. You can find them on Instagram. Go to the New York Times, click on the link. This is what Israel is doing. Now, the New York Times has also been promoting, this is to its credit, that it's telling us this. What we need to know about what Israel is doing and the support we are offering it. But Israel, to its discredit, has been also platforming Israeli propagandists who are insisting that there was widespread sexual violence by Hamas on October 7th. And why do they do that? Well, I think, after nearly 4 months of aerial bombardments, of killing civilians, I saw the number 30,000 dead Gazans. I don't know if I can't say I saw that was posted on a Facebook site. I think that sounds right. I don't want to corroborate that, but maybe that's where we are now. With 30,000 dead, the number that were killed by Hamas, under 1,000 civilians, 1,200 if you include IDF, people start to think, I don't think you get to kill 30,000 people just because you're mad. Most of them are innocent. Almost all of them are innocent. Many of them children, maybe 50%, close to 50% children. You don't get to do that. So what does Israel do? They up the ante. Well, it wasn't just that they killed people. They were raping people. They were beheading babies. That's who they are. It's okay for us to kill 30,000 of them because they beheaded babies and they were raping corpses. Right? That's what they're trying to get you to think. That activate that reptilian part of your brain. And the New York Times is promoting that propaganda. But they kind of got a little bit taken to task, and there was a lot of pushback. And people said, well, you don't really have the evidence. Fact Check said, we don't really see the pictures. This hasn't been proven. They do have some pictures. This is from Jeffrey Gettleman, who's been kind of their lead on the Israeli side of it. And there's a picture, but it's just a rave. It's the site of the rave. It looks like, yeah, some cars were destroyed. It's not good. You don't see you don't see dead babies or people raped. The evidence just isn't there. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. But we have pictures, lots and lots of copious, irrefutable evidence of what Israel's doing. Blowing up neighborhoods, destroying hospitals, torturing people. You saw the risks of that man. People, they don't even know if they're even part of Hamas. And the response when you are talking about the violence against Israelis, well, we describe visual evidence based on interviews. And yet they acknowledge no autopsies, no forensic evidence. Oh, well, it's not unusual for such evidence to be minimal in cases of wartime sexual violence. Why? Okay. How could they not have known? Israel's always fighting a war for public opinion. They're always trying to get people on their side. They're always trying to dehumanize Palestinians and to justify their oppression, their persecution of Palestine. In what universe would they not have gone after the every piece of visual forensic evidence they could? Of course they would have done that if it was there. It's just so hard to. Now, I'm not saying we have seen pictures. I showed you the video of Shani Lauk, and it was very upsetting, where she was her body, either alive or dead, being paraded in a truck by Hamas militants. Very upsetting. Nearly nude. That was the way she was dressed. They had not disrobed her. She was dressed in that dress, which was backless or almost so. But it's very upsetting. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. If Israel had all this evidence, why aren't they presenting it? Okay, got a caller. I'm not sure who it is. It's great to talk to you. Who do I have on the line here?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Christopher.
Hey, Christopher, are you listening to Halitics?
I sure am. I was watching you on YouTube.
Awesome. Great to hear from you. You are a new caller, I believe. What's on your mind,
caller,
sir?
But not a new viewer. I've been watching you off and on since you started, or at least I could find you. And I actually made a comment on your YouTube channel, and you featured my comment on one of your shows. That was a few months back.
All right.
I'm Insight Deluxe too. You made I had one of the comments. I called your frequent guest Blue MAGA. And funny story there, I had fallen asleep watching your show. Not to say it was boring or anything.
Yeah, I was going to make that joke. I was, of course, going to make that joke, Chris, but go ahead, please.
And I was just laying down, and my wife walked into the room, and she saw the comment on the TV. And she said, "Chris, isn't that your handle?" And I woke up, and I said, "Wow, they're talking about me on there." It was kind of a special little occasion there, so I thought it was interesting. So I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Awesome. Well, what's on your mind? What did I say that inspired you to pick up the blower and call me?
So I saw you had asked Jill Stein some questions during a speech she gave recently, And I took issue with one of your questions. And I just wanted to call and sort of give my side of what you, and kind of get a better sense of what you were saying in terms of that question. You had asked her about the identity politics thing and how you thought that sort of thing was divisive for, majority of the country. And I figured I'd give you a call to give you a chance to sort of refine your comments or give me a sense of how you see it from my perspective. I feel that, it's been, that term has been misused or misappropriated. And I think that it's something that has, for me, when people make comments like you did, that it can be divisive, I felt like if it says to me that, the many people form their politics through their identities. I'm sure you understand that. But in particular, it's oftentimes that's a historical identity. And so we talk about Black Americans sort of considering how they may have an identity politics or play an identity politics game. It's oftentimes cynical, but sometimes historically it's been significant. We're going through some of the great sort of political leaders in Black history. I'm going back to people like Paul Robeson and W.B. Du Bois, who were communists, open communists, but who felt as if they weren't class reductionists. And they saw that race was, in particular, was a product of capitalism, that the whole idea of race came out the legacy of slavery. And so they attached their communist ideals, their class-first ideals, class war ideals, to the race situation, the legacy of slavery, and seeing those as not as in opposition, but as working together. They're coordinated. And I understand for many white folks in America, they may not see Black America having a racial identity as something that's positive. They may see it as something that's divisive. But for many Black Americans, that is how they see their relationship to politics. When they see the voting, electoral politics, when they see street level politics, the battle of the bullet, right? That's Malcolm X. So when we understand our history, it's difficult for us to separate the politics from the legacy of slavery.
So let me just jump in real quick, Chris. Chris, let me just jump in real quick because it is getting. I've actually been on for over an hour, and I would love to transfer your call to tomorrow's program because I'm going to get into that. But let me give you a response now. I'll let you finish. Close the show, and then if you want to continue tomorrow, we can, or whenever you get another chance. I'm not trying to shut you down. It's just that I only have a limited amount of time, but I'm going to give you plenty of time to respond. I think what you say is very fair. I am not a class reductionist. If I presented as a class reductionist to Dr. Stein, then that was on me, and I misrepresented myself. I do think that winning elections is essential to making the kind of positive change that I think would make life better for tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans who are, and disproportionate number of those who need government assistance are Black and brown people, which, by the way, it is the first day of Black History Month. So happy Black History Month. I don't know if I get a chance to talk about that to viewers and listeners. So I don't want to say there's nothing to identity. In fact, yesterday I spoke about ways in which a class-focused or class reductionist doesn't address sufficiently the challenges that the trans community faces, for example. And I agree that it wouldn't be sufficient to address the challenges that people of color face for several different reasons. But I think it would get us an awful long way because so many of the problems that people of color face, I believe, are based on poverty, or just simply, if not poverty, just a struggling lifestyle, not enough. So issues like healthcare, a debt-free education, a secure retirement, a remunerative, interesting employment as a policy, a government policy that all have access to, I think would address very significantly the challenges that disproportionately beset African American communities, Latino communities, Native American communities, what have you. So I do believe that. I was specifically objecting to the term, and I may not have made this clearly, point. I specifically objected to the term white supremacy, just as I used to object to the term white privilege, because I believe those terms don't fairly or accurately capture America today. I know people disagree with that. That's fine. I don't believe they do. And I do definitely believe that they put off working class white people and poor white people who I want to attract to my multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition. So that's what I was objecting to. Finally, with respect to identity politics, I think it's very understandable that people would look at their own identity, and whatever that might be. I mean, your identity could be race-based, could be religion-based, it could be class-based. I identify as a working person and say, I want to support candidates or politicians who will be there for me. And I'm good with that. Where I have a problem is when you exclude other people's identities or you deprecate them as though they're not important. Or what I also have a problem with in some forms of identity politics is where you look at the identity of the candidate and you say that's what's important. So I'm going to vote for, say, Jim Clyburn for South Carolina Senate Congress because he's black, not looking at his policies and saying, well, are his policies good for my identity? Do these policies benefit the African American community? I think a lot of black voters are saying, you know what, especially black male voters are saying, you know what, I don't think Barack Obama's policies were good for me. They weren't that good for my identity. And therefore, maybe I won't support a Democrat or I won't support Kamala Harris, even though she's half African American and half Asian, but her policies weren't good for my identity group. So I'm not going to, and so my problem is if you say, I'm going to vote for this person because they're a woman and I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a woman. It's fine if you say she's a woman and her policies are good for women. I think you'd be wrong, but you could say that. But, or I would be good with, and the final word, I know I'm jabbering on and on, it's not fair to you, but I just want to make this point. I think a person who is a woman who votes based on identity politics in the Democratic primary in 2016 should say to herself, who's the candidate who will be better for women? Because that's what I care about if that is true. And the candidate who's better for women is Bernie Sanders. So identity politics would compel me to vote for Bernie Sanders, even though Hillary's a woman. And yet that isn't what many who promote identity politics said. Okay, I really talked too long, Chris. Please go ahead and feel free to call back tomorrow if you want to get more in also.
Sure, I appreciate your clarification. I understand what you're saying there. It makes sense. I think I do have to rebut that a bit, and I understand the voting part. And I think that is part of the that is what it's come to, is that many people don't. That was the problem I had with a lot of my friends. I was a crazy Bernie guy, and they didn't understand why. And I kept saying he's the best candidate for Black America because of his policies, right? Like the argument you're making. Even though he's an old Jewish dude from Brooklyn who's always yelling, he actually had great policies. The Occupy guy, he's crossing a lot of lines there that I think he was the answer to Trumpism. That was the argument I was making. But again, a lot of Black folks didn't see it that way. They were hung up on Obama and Michelle Obama and the whole Black Camelot. I get it. But on the flip side, the thing you said about the Native Americans have their own history, though, right? They've got reservations. They've got this connection to the policies that is unique to them. The Civil Rights Movement was specific to Black America, even though it affected the wider population, right? We're talking about Dred Scott ruling. These are separate policies and rules and laws that didn't apply to Pakistani Americans, that didn't apply to Sikh Americans. It was specific to the Black American experience. So when you say policies can be divisive if they only appeal to one group. That doesn't really represent the history of these groups. So when someone's for reparations, I'm just naming that, and that can be 20 different things, right? That reparations for Japanese internment was for Japanese people who were interned. It wasn't for Black Americans, right? So we have to kind of see policies not as things that have to always be everybody, that they have to be specific because they're specific histories. And I think that's what identity politics starts to fall off, is that we're not really seeing it as they are, that these identities have historical and developments, right? You can't associate Latino American experience, but Puerto Rican American experience with Black American, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding policy as being specific as well. You know, I'm a Jesse 84 guy. I'm a Jesse Jackson 84 guy. Maybe there's something we can get into tomorrow, or if I call back, is that, you know, he had a Black agenda in 84. He wasn't afraid to use that term. And he was doing his policies in line with a civil rights, you know, historical agenda, right? He had a whole set series of agenda items that he felt were specific to Black America because of their specific history. And so we have to kind of I see his campaign in 84 as sort of a template of what we need today. We need a Jesse 84, Black America needs a Jesse 84 who can articulate the Black agenda, because it's being smushed and smoldered and lost and squeezed today when it's really more necessary than it ever was. So, you know, I hope that kind of makes sense of where I'm coming from there.
No, it really does. And I promised you the last word, Chris. So there are some thoughts I had while you were speaking, but I don't want to detract or overstate what you said. So let me leave it at that, unless you have anything final, any short, brief comment. And then if you will call in tomorrow, I'd love to talk to you. We don't have to make an appointment. I'll be on. And I will be addressing, by the way, a comment by Rando Calrissian, which I think is somewhat a little stronger than what you said, but similar. That's not you, is it?
It is me. That is I.
Oh, it is. Okay.
I.
Okay. Right. Because because you used a different term. Right. Because I clicked on that. Okay. So you're Rando. Okay. I called you RC. I'm going to respond directly. What my plan tomorrow was to actually, Chris, show that comment and then respond to it. And I'm going to still do that. Okay. So if you want to join me, I'm happy to continue the conversation at that point.
All right. Appreciate it. Solidarity, sir.
Hey, man, I appreciate you for calling in. That's awesome. And to me, this is what this is about. We can say things that that somebody doesn't like, but we need to be able to listen to what they don't like, and then hear each other. And hopefully we won't always agree. We may never, I try this with this other guy who's always commenting, Jeff, and he will never agree, but I at least want to be able to have a respectful disagreement. And it sounds like you and I are a lot closer, obviously, than Jeff and I are, but I appreciate you calling in and being so, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
Amenable.
Congenial, whatever. Thanks, Chris. Let me leave it at that.
Yep.
You have a great day.
You, sir.
All right, we'll talk soon, I hope, and I'll read your comments some more, and we'll get to that tomorrow. That's going to do it. Oh, I wanted to get him turn off his mic before he hung up, because you heard that little mic sound, the hang up sound. I'm hoping to get rid of that before Chris left. Chris, thanks for calling. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.